Let me introduce ourselves. I'm Ravi and my colleague Naresh. We both, train together. So we are Docker certified associates, certified ITIL V3 Foundation, certified in WebSphere application server administration, and we both are AWS solution architect associates. So far, we've been associated with IBM. So we do teach DevOps, Docker, and Kubernetes for IBM. We do teach DevOps, Docker, and Kubernetes for Optum. Recently, we completed for Deloitte. We completed for Bank of New York, and many more online clients we do deal with regularly. So as many people are asking, to come into retail market as well, just start off doing this today. The quick agenda for today's session, we are starting with evolution of IT industry, how IT industry is changed in past few years, and then what's the difference between physical servers, VMs, and the new buzzword in the market, containers. Why do we need containers? And then we go to Docker, why it has become so popular, what's the content that we usually deal with, and what is orchestration of containers, and why do we need to go for certification of Docker, and we end with a simple demo of this. This is the quick agenda. So before jumping, let's recollect the definition of software engineering. Maybe in our graduation days, post-graduation days, I hope you all remember this. The application of systematic, disciplined, quantifiable approach to the development, operation, and maintenance of a software. So if we want to make a software as a successful one, as an efficient one, the development of the software should be perfect. The operation should be efficient. Then only the software becomes stable. Of course, every software needs maintenance too. If these three phases are successfully implemented, then we can say that particular software is perfect. That particular software is efficient. When we think of software, usually being IT engineers, we think of applications more. So what is the application? There are different types of applications team we see day-to-day activities. First, we started with standalone applications. We used to call them as desktop applications, standalone applications, or client applications. So these applications usually we download, we install on our desktops. Our favorite process, next finish, or a couple of commands we need to execute to get them installed. With this process, we can install particular software or application on particular system. The person who sits in front of that particular system can only access that particular software. If n number of people would like to access that particular application across the world, it is not possible in the case of standalone applications or client applications. This is where the next level of applications, right? Web applications have come into the picture. With the help of web applications, yes, you can host the application at a centralized server so that n number of people from various geographic locations can access that application. Usually we use web servers to host web applications. As there are many web servers available in market, you might have heard about n number of web servers like Apache, IIS, IHS, nowadays Nginx being popular. There are many web servers, iPlanet, many web servers in market. You may use any web server to host a simple typical web application. There are limitations for web applications as well. That is where we started using enterprise applications, where you see rich business logic, messaging management, session persistency, all these features. Simply saying, almost all e-business applications we are using nowadays, whether it is online banking or e-commerce portals, whatever we are using nowadays, these are all enterprise applications. When we go for enterprise applications, yes, these are also available across the globe, but the main thing for enterprise applications is availability. I never know when I need to wire some money to my friend, so I want this application to be up and running all the time. So high availability is one of the key features for enterprise applications. In today's world, you know the importance of enterprise applications, you know the importance of online banking, e-shopping carts, online reservation systems, all these things. In order to host these enterprise applications, we need a sophisticated environment where we need all the services like messaging services, session based services. This is where application servers come into the picture. There are variety of application servers in market, starting with WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss. These are all famous application servers in market. We usually host enterprise applications in application servers. So when we think of software, typically there are applications for us. We have desktop applications or standalone applications, and then web applications, and then enterprise applications. At the end of the day, the application should be developed properly. The operation, in the sense how we are releasing the application to the end user, is typically operation. And maintenance, once you deliver the application, if there are any issues, you might need to apply a few patches, you might need to release a few performance fixes. These are all the things mandatory, right? Or else we'll lose customer satisfaction. This is where maintenance comes into the picture. So this is what software engineering says simply. With this, let's start with first stage of IT industry. Few years ago, many years ago, I can say. For the development process, we used to use waterfall model. I hope everybody of you know waterfall model. This is one of the first SDLC models we read in our graduation, post graduation days. So waterfall model is the first model we used to follow. As you see in the picture, it is step by step model. As we have n number of phases in SDLC, software development lifecycle, like planning, designing, implementing, testing, deployment, all these things. We should go step by step. Once you complete the plan, once you have rigid documentation with you, then only go for design. Once you complete your design, then only go for implementation. This is kind of limitation for waterfall model. Once you complete one step, then only you should go to next step. Suppose there is a change in the requirement. Your client asked you to use some different color or some different design. You can't go back and change the things in waterfall model because the requirements are rigid in waterfall model. Once you document the requirements, you can't change. I can say we never change. That is where people started looking for another model. So this is the limitation of waterfall model. Because of this, it used to take a lot of time to release particular feature or new feature or new application features to the end users. This is one of the pain points of waterfall model. And the application architecture, earlier days, the application architecture what we used to use was monolithic architecture. Monolithic in the sense tightly coupled. All the application components or your infrastructure components were tightly coupled those days. Tightly coupled. If you take earlier days applications, they used to host application, web server, and your database all together on a single system for simple applications. There was no application component isolation. All were tightly coupled. That was monolithic architecture. In this case, if one application component fails, if one of the application components fail, right, other application components may be affected. The same way we can think of infrastructure also. So this was monolithic architecture. Earlier days we used to use monolithic architecture. And then once the application is designed, once the application is ready, we need to host the application. How we host the application? Where do we host the application? This is where physical servers come into the picture. This is where physical servers come into the picture. What are these physical servers? Any idea? Anybody what is physical server? Any idea? Anybody what is a physical server? You can speak if you would like to, or you can ping me in the chat too. A physical server. All right, no problem. Simply saying, physical server is nothing but a big fat server. A big fat server with good amount of RAM and good amount of disk space. Mean to say, if I say physical, this is normal server only or normal CPU only, but it does contain good amount of RAM and good amount of CPU. Imagine This is of 300 gigs of RAM, and I do have around 1000 gigs of disk space available. So this is typically a physical server. You may say it as bare metal server or a big server. Earlier days we used to use these physical servers to host the applications. So now the important thing here is we need to think what are all the things we need to install or we need to set up in order to host an application, which is very big thing to discuss. If you take any server, normal server, what are all the things we need to install or configure in order to host an application? The first basic thing, whenever you would like to install an application, or if you want to install anything, if you want to host anything, the first thing that we need to have is operating system. Operating system is the first layer ever you see on any server in order to host any application further. Imagine my application is a Java based application which runs on some Tomcat or Glassfish or some WebSphere or WebLogic, whatever it is. So the first layer, whatever we use, is operating system. Can it be Windows? Can it be Red Hat Linux? Can it be SUSE Linux? Can it be, you know, any other flavor like Ubuntu, any CentOS, whatever it is? First, we need to have some operating system. Then install the dependencies. Dependencies is the word which contains everything that your application needs. Suppose, as I'm telling you, my application is a Java based application. So the first dependency, I should have Java on my machine. Once I have Java, next level dependency. In order to host the application, you need a server. Can it be WebSphere or WebLogic or Tomcat, whatever it is? Let us say it as Tomcat. So I have Tomcat also. Finally, I get the application which is designed by using waterfall model with monolithic architecture and all. I just host that particular application here. So this is the structure or the content usually you maintain at your physical server, right? Operating system, on top of it we installed Java, on top of it we hosted Tomcat, then we deployed our WAR file. This machine has the capacity of 300 GB and 1000 GB capacity. If we closely observe, if we really think of the utilization of these resources, see, I do have 300 GB RAM, I do have 1000 GB disk space. Why do we need this much disk space to host a simple Java application on Tomcat? If you ever work with Tomcat, hardly it occupies 2 GB RAM as heap memory. Your Tomcat needs hardly 2 GB at production range. It doesn't need more than that. And Java OS and maybe other dependencies on your operating system may need 8 more GB or 6 more GB of RAM. So altogether, to host this particular application, 10 to 15 GB RAM is more than enough. And if we come to disk space, 20 to 30 GB is more than enough. But we are hosting this application on a big fat server with 300 GB RAM and 1000 GB hard disk. Apparently, we are wasting our resources here, which is directly proportional to our organization's money. We are wasting organization's money here. We may think of another point here. Why can't we host few more applications on the same server so that we can use the resources better? So if you think of this, if you think of using other applications are also on the same server, right? It is usually not correct, because at enterprise level, we maintain project isolation. When I say project isolation, from project to project, from application to application, we maintain different infrastructure completely. We never host multiple applications on the same server. We never host multiple enterprise applications or web applications, whatever it is. We never host multiple applications on the same machine. So that's why for one server, yes, it is dedicated to one application only. We do not host multiple applications on the same server. So that's why, yes, only one application on this physical server, whatever the utilization it may go, yeah, let it be. This is how team, earlier days we used to use our servers and we used to host our applications. Here we may think of another point also. Why should we go for 300 GB, 1000 GB? capacity. Why can't we take a simple machine with less capacity? Earlier days, we didn't have performance checks, performance tests, load tests, stress tests, and all. IT teams never knew how much application uses, how much RAM application needs, right? That's why they use it to keep maximum capacity. Okay, let it use whatever it wants, and they use it to leave it like that. So that's the problem we faced earlier days with physical servers. Yes, physical servers are good in a way, will have a good capacity, but if application doesn't use whatever the resources available, it's waste of money. So this is the first point. This is the foundation step for our Docker discussion. Physical server we discussed now. I hope you're all clear here. If you have any questions, you can ping me over the chat. I can discuss. Thank you. Let's go back. So this is where we started using physical servers, and then where we hosted these physical servers earlier days. A few organizations hosted in their own building itself. A few organizations started using data centers also to host these physical servers. So the hosting environment becomes data center where you have your application infrastructure. This is the first generation of IT, I can say 10 years ago maybe. Next generation started with new model called Agile for development, where IT teams, especially development teams, started developing new features of the applications very quickly. I can say 2 weeks. Usually they call it as sprint. 2 weeks time period they keep, and they keep on writing their user stories, whatever they want to implement and all, and they complete it in 2 weeks, and they give a demo to the client. If client likes it, yes, then they plan to release it into the market. So for every 2 weeks, development teams are coming up with new features of the application with agile model. So we can say in agile model you can take dynamic requirements also. See, in waterfall model you couldn't take dynamic requirements, whereas in agile, yes, I can take dynamic requirements. If client wants to change something in between, yes, I can go back and change. Here you will see more interaction with the client, and time to market is very good when compared to waterfall model. Waterfall model used to take 4 months sometimes, but in agile 2 weeks you are ready with the new feature. Now it is on the shoulders of operations team to deliver it to production environment or not. So this is where agile has become very popular. Agile became very popular. Almost all organizations, I can say 95% of the organizations started using agile from last 8 years or 9 years. They are into all this agile process. They are working, almost all development teams are working on agile model only. We are not focusing on agile now because we are not into DevOps. Our class is focused mainly on Docker, so that's why I'm not discussing much about agile. And then the application architecture became entire architecture. From monolithic we moved to entire architecture. You might have heard about 3-tier architecture, something like 3-tier architecture, maybe experience. So we isolate presentation layer, we isolate business layer, and we isolate database layer. I host all the static content, whatever home pages, welcome pages you see, we put all these things into web servers. And business logic, when you click on submit button, when you click on transfer button, when you click on book ticket button, it shows you some background process is running. That background process is nothing but business logic. Usually we host all this business logic application content in application server. Once transaction is done, a database table will be updated or created or deleted, whatever it is. The database may change in the background. So presentation layer, business layer, database layer, 3 layers you are seeing. This is with respect to application. If you think of infrastructure also, client layer, nothing but your browser, your mobile apps, right? These are all clients. By using them only, you are accessing your banking application, for an example, right? So application is hosted somewhere. You are using different clients, whether it is your mobile app, whether it is your system browser. Nowadays with SMS also, we are getting details of your banking accounts, right? So these are all clients. So clients are different. Your hosted environment is different, and database they might have kept somewhere in some other data center, and this application connects to that data center. So 3 tiers you are seeing here also. Client, where you hosted your application, is middleware, and where you have your database is backend. Here also you have 3 layers, right? Usually we call it as 3-tier architecture or entire architecture. From monolithic, we moved to entire architecture. We isolated application components with application content as well as infrastructure. And then the real thing that changed the world over the night, I can say, is virtualization. To host the applications from physical servers, we moved to virtualization. Virtualization changed many things in IT industry. How it changed, how it is different from physical. That is what we are going to discuss now. Okay, I'm taking same box again. Imagine this is the same physical server. The main problem we faced with earlier case when we used direct physical server was resource utilization. This was one of the biggest problems when we discussed physical server. Now, welcome to virtualization world. Here what we can do. The main big machine, whatever we have with 300 GB RAM, 1000 GB disk space, we can split into smaller pieces. We can split into multiple pieces. Each piece we can call as a virtual machine or simply a VM. Each piece you can call as virtual machine or simply a VM. You can have as many VMs as you want on a single physical, and each VM looks like a separate machine altogether. Each VM has its own IP address. Each VM can have its own application content as well. Suppose on this VM, I want some Linux based operating system. I would like to have a Java application. On this VM, I may use Windows OS. I may host a .NET based application. On another VM, I may have again another Linux OS. I may have some Node.js related application. Like this, you can have different applications on different VMs, but each VM is independent of another VM. This VM doesn't have any dependency with this VM. This way, we hosted multiple applications. We hosted multiple applications by using VM infrastructure just now. But the real thing we need to understand, what is the point of isolation here, or how we could split these machines? What is the measure or what is the yardstick we took here in order to make this happen, right? This is what called virtualization. Usually one big machine we made into smaller pieces. We called it as virtualization. Here, the virtualization, whatever we make in VM, is called hardware level virtualization. It is called hardware level virtualization. What we do here is we just assign the capacity. Imagine this is my Linux one, the first one. This Linux needs GB RAM and it hardly needs 30 GB disk space. So I just assign 20 GB RAM and 30 GB disk space to this VM. It uses 20 GB and 30 GB only. This is maximum capacity. It's a kind of restriction also, you can say. 20 GB RAM and 30 GB hard disk we are restricting for this application. The same way, imagine suppose Windows 1, you may think it needs more memory, so give 25 GB RAM and it may need around 100 GB disk space. This is how you can take hardware limits or hardware resources as measurement, and you can split the capacity or you can split the bigger machine to smaller machines. So this is how we started using VMs, VMware infrastructure. How this happens? How we can make a bigger machine to smaller machines? Do we need to install something? Do we need to configure something? Yes, we need to. This is where something called hypervisor comes into the picture. This is where something called hypervisor comes into the picture. There are two types of hypervisors. Type 1 and type 2. We call it as type 1, type 2 usually. There are two types of hypervisors. One can be installed on bare metal directly. I mean to say, if you take a physical server without operating system also, you can host hypervisor. Hypervisor has its own things. It can maintain VMs. So without operating system also, you can maintain hypervisors, which is called type 1 hypervisor. And then there is another type of hypervisor which should only be installed on top of operating system. I hope you all installed something like VirtualBox or VM players when you practiced in your graduation days or post graduation days, right? So when we wanted to host multiple operating systems, or let's take a typical scenario, I have a Windows laptop, I would like to practice Linux things, right? That time we used to use VMs, right? If you see on my screen also, I have a VirtualBox placed here. I'm using Mac OS, but I wanted to practice some Ubuntu. I wanted to practice Ubuntu. So I installed something called as VirtualBox. On top of it, I installed Ubuntu. At the same time, I can run multiple operating systems on my machine as well. But how I created this Ubuntu? What is the measurement? If you closely see here, the base memory I assigned is 3.5 GB around. So it uses 3.5 GB of my RAM, and I assigned around 20 GB disk space. 20 GB disk space. So these are the restrictions I gave to this VM. So these kind of things, VirtualBox, VM players, VMware, all these things are type 2 hypervisors. If you want to install these guys, you should have some operating system already there. So that's why we have laptop already. That's where you install VirtualBox, VMs, all these things. These are another type of hypervisors. Usually we use these type of hypervisors for our practice, but at enterprise level, at your organization level, if you would like to host applications in production environment with VMs, we should go for bare metal hypervisor, that is type 1 hypervisor. You can take a bare metal directly, install hypervisor, then it enables hardware level virtualization. With the help of hardware level virtualization, you can create as many VMs as you want. Thus, you can make your resources availability or resources usage better. This is how VMs changed the things over the night. Many organizations adopted VMs. Many organizations till today, almost all organizations are using VMs only. Even though you go for Amazon, Google Cloud, Azure, all these cloud providers, right? You see more VMs only. They give you VMs only. They ask you, hey Ravi, what capacity you would like to have? 1 GB RAM, 2 CPU, 30 GB disk space. Okay, take this VM. So VMs are very popular. VMs are very popular. Most of the organizations are using VMs only nowadays. Right. So this is about VM, hardware level virtualization, hypervisor, all these things. There are a few improvement points about VMs also. There are a few improvement points for VMs also. The first improvement point I can say is OS maintenance. The first improvement point I can say is OS maintenance. Here, when you think of VMs, every VM needs its own operating system. Every VM needs its own operating system, and that is full-blown operating system. I mean to say full-fledged operating system, a complete operating system. Usually, if you download CentOS or Ubuntu or any Red Hat Linux, they occupy 6 GB or 7 GB of your disk space, right? So these are full-blown operating systems, a complete operating system. You need to take care of operating system along with your application. We usually apply patches, hotfixes to applications. The same way, you need to apply patches to your operating system as well. Usually at enterprise level, right? Every 3 months we apply maintenance patches to the operating systems. And also, apart from maintenance, you need to take care of operating system licenses if it is a licensed one. So OS maintenance is one of the big things in VMs, because if you run thousands of VMs, yes, you need to take care of all these operating systems. That is the first thing I would like to talk about. And then the second thing and the important thing is boot time. What is this boot time? See, our focus is mainly on application. We always think of application. Imagine whether it is this one or this one, either of these two. So I want my application to be accessible to the end user. I'm just starting my VM. I'm just starting my application. server, or maybe an operating system, maybe simply a machine. How much time I need to wait to access my application? You tell me, team. Usually, when you start your system, whether it is your Windows desktop or Linux machine, whatever it is, how much time we need to wait to access the application deployed in it? How much time you need to wait for the application to be up and running? Any idea? How much time you need to wait for your application to be up and running? All right. So usually when we host the applications at enterprise level or in your personal laptops also, they might take around 2 to 5 minutes. 2 to 5 minutes depends on your configuration again. They take around 2 to 5 minutes to come up. In case of critical situations like outages and all, every minute counts, every second counts, right? So the application should be up as early as possible. And if you closely observe one more thing here, this application, whatever we are discussing, is dependent on underlying hardware. First, your operating system should initialize, then the services you installed on the operating system should initialize, then your application server should start, then only application comes up. So boot time is one of the important things again. And after boot time, the next thing we need to understand or next thing we need to discuss is about dynamic allocation of resources. Dynamic allocation of resources. Suppose one of my Windows machines or one of my Linux machines needed 1 more GB extra RAM. 1 more GB extra RAM. But you restricted the resources here. There is no capacity. Suppose you have 20 GB RAM, 20 GB is occupied. You are getting more user requests. So it needs more RAM, which is impossible in VM because you restricted that to 20 GB only. Manually, you can go and you can increase if you want, but your application could not increase automatically. Your application could not borrow 1 more GB from your host automatically. Whatever the resources you allocated, they are fixed in VM case usually. So dynamic allocation of resources usually not possible when you create VM infrastructure like this. This is another challenge. In this case, application would go into hung state. Usually, we hear out of memory exceptions. System is hung or service is hung. Locks are not getting rotated. These are all because of resource. These are all because of resources. So dynamic allocation of resources is one of the challenges with VM infrastructure. And one more important thing is scalability. When we think of scalability, right? When we think of scalability, the first thing that comes into our mind, time. How much time we need to get a new VM? How much time we need to set up another 10 machines? See, scalability is nothing but, increasing your capacity, simply saying. You see nowadays, Flipkart is announcing big billion day, Amazon is announcing great Indian sale or blah, blah, blah sales. In that case, usually more people access those applications. When more people access those applications, obviously we need to increase the capacity or your application may go down. So in this case, yes, scalability comes into the picture. If you would like to scale up your infrastructure, in case of VMs, you need to add few more VMs or maybe few more servers where you have new VMs. But at enterprise level, it takes a lot of time to get new VMs. A few organizations take minutes, a few organizations takes days, a few organizations take months. Earlier days when we started in IT, when we were in infrastructure management, it used to take 3 months for us to get new VMs. Once you get the VMs again, you need to install OS, middleware, then application deployment. So scalability is not an easy task at all. So it used to take days or months sometimes. You need to go for stress test again. You need to go for high availability test again. Once you set up new infrastructure, this is a big challenge in scalability. You need to add your new IPs to the network. You need to add new IPs to your load balancer so that application routes to new servers. This is all a big thing actually when you think of scalability. In VMs, yes, it used to take a lot of time to scale up your infrastructure. These are all the challenges with VMs. These are all the challenges with VMs. So, but still, VMs have their own importance. Many organizations are using their own VMs. So this is where, this is how we migrated from physicals to VM, and we started using hosted data centers also. Earlier days, we used to maintain our servers at our own office. Now we started using data centers across the globe with high availability, proper temperature constraints, and proper security, all these things. And we started even using other data centers also. Suppose I need servers, I don't have space or capacity, I can borrow from some other organization, or I may host my own server in some other organization space. We started using hosted data centers. Almost every organizations, almost all organizations nowadays have their own data centers where they host all their servers, and they maintain replicas also, DC1, DC2, DC3, DC4, like that. If one data center goes down because of any natural calamity, yes, another comes up automatically. So this is where we started using hosted data centers also. This is second generation. Welcome to today's generation, or third generation, I can say. We are in DevOps world. Earlier days, we used to use Agile only for development. Development teams used to use Agile. Nowadays, we extended Agile to infrastructure teams as well. Agile system administration, or Agile, is extended to infrastructure teams, which is nothing but DevOps. With this, development teams and operations teams started working together. Earlier, they used to work on their own silos. Development teams always look for speed, speed, speed. They want to develop the applications or new features with speed in mind. But our operations team always looks for, stability. What happens if I introduce a new feature to my production environment? Will it collapse the entire environment, or will it be stable or not? These things operations teams, usually keep in their mind. That's why earlier days, though new features are ready, we used to take months. Okay, let's deploy these feature next month on so and so date, between so and so time. Maintenance windows, client approvals, management approvals we used to take to host the applications earlier days. But with DevOps world, or with DevOps implementation, right? CI/CD is one of the buzzwords in market. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, or deployment, whatever it is. People started sending the changes immediately to the hosted environments as well. If the feature is ready at development phase, once it is tested, it should be delivered to end user as early as possible, or I can say immediately. CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, or deployment. So this is where DevOps became very popular. One of the hottest skill set in market we have today. DevOps, development team and operations team started working together. It gave the scope for many implementations, where we started seeing version control systems, configuration management systems. We started seeing log aggregators. We started seeing performance monitoring. Many technologies have come with DevOps. And then the entire architecture became microservices. The application infrastructure, the application design has become microservices. The big application, whatever we had earlier days, let us take online banking application. When we think of online banking application, it's a single application for us when we host it, but it has many features inside. It has login feature, it has funds transfer, it has credit card, it has loans. All these are different phases. Suppose loans feature is failed with some bug or some issue. Obviously, we bring down the total application, we fix it, and we rehost the same application. So because of one component, a person who would like to wire some money to his friend would not access our application, because you brought down entire application because of one component. This is where microservices are helpful. We started splitting up application components as pieces again, and each piece is called as a microservice. Login is a separate piece, funds transfer is a separate piece, loan module is a separate piece. Even further also, you can dig down and you can split them. These are all called microservices. So with this, if one module fails, that's okay, you can just bring down that service and you can bring it back. Other modules remain same. If they are dependency modules, yes, they will also go down, but as far as they are good, as far as it is independent, yes, you can fix only that particular module. And another advantage in case of scalability, suppose today is month first, imagine I more people access transactions page or funds transfer page. In that case, I just increase the capacity of that particular service. Remaining services stay at the same level. This is another advantage of microservices. And another advantage, if we talk about earlier days, we used to use single infrastructure or middleware infrastructure. Suppose if it is a big banking application, we used to use either WebSphere or WebLogic or JBoss only. But with microservices, I can host login piece on Node.js. I can host transactions page on Tomcat. I can host, mini statement on some Python module. Like this, I can use different technologies to host my applications. This is the beauty of microservices. Now, almost all organizations nowadays, they are splitting up their traditional applications, large scale applications to microservices. And then to host microservices, to run these microservices, because these are minimal, these are smaller, to host these microservices, yes, containers have come into the picture. This is where containers we are going to discuss. What are these containers and why do we need these containers? You might have heard about a problem you might be hearing almost daily. Application is working in development environment, but application is failing in production environment. You open a call, you invite everybody, you call networking team, you call Linux team, you call, configuration management team, database team, everybody. At the end of the day, we call developers. They come online, they say application is working absolutely on my laptop. I don't know what the issue is. Go and check your infrastructure. This is one of the buzzwords, or this is one of the common issues we face at enterprise level. Application is working fine in dev and not working in production environment. Why? Why? Because if we closely observe how application is getting designed or being tested, right? Imagine this is a developer laptop and this is your production server where you are hosting the application for the end user. Usually on developer laptop, they may use Windows operating system and they may use some Eclipse or NetBeans to design the application, and they use some test servers as part of Eclipse or something to run the applications. And finally, once everything is fine, they start designing WAR file. So this is how usually development teams work on their own machines. But when it comes to production machine, we go for licensed operating system. Imagine I'm using Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and then we use some enterprise Java. Obviously, enterprise range application server, and then we host the WAR file here. So the same WAR file, whatever designed by our developer, I hosted in production environment also. This is a dev laptop. Imagine this is your prod server. What changed here? Everything changed if you observe. On dev machine, he just tested this code by using his own IDEs or some test servers. But at production range, entire picture is different. Use Linux operating system, enterprise level Java, app server is different, but the application is same. So the depending environment or the underlying environment is completely different from dev laptop to production server. That's why we may see a few issues. Because of these dependency layers. So this is how we can understand why we are facing issues in production but not in dev. We need to find a solution for it. How to find a solution? Let's sit with developer, because today we are in DevOps world. We have to sit with developers. Let's discuss to test the application on some common platform. Let us say, hey developer, I would like to use this application, or I would like to run this application on CentOS at my production level, and I would like to use Java 1.8 version in my production environment. I would like to host it on Tomcat 8.5 version in my production environment. Then I would like to have WAR file. So this is the picture. This is the picture where I would like to host my application, or how would I like to host my application. So what we need to do, we need to discuss with the developer, and we need to have this tested on this platform only. Once it is working fine, then only we can say application is working fine at development environment also, not on his laptop. Let's take a machine and work like this. Once this is working fine, let's not take only war file to production environment, or let's not take only this application to your IIT QA environments. Let's pack this whole structure. Let's pack this whole structure and dump it in your production environment. What I mean to say, this is the critical thing to understand for Docker. What I mean to say, imagine this is your production environment. What I am saying is, don't go to production environment again, install CentOS, install Java, install Tomcat, then deploying Warfile. Don't go for all these things. Those days are gone. So what we need to do is dump all this package directly to your production server. So whatever you designed, where you tested your application, just take it as a single package. Just take it as a single package and run it in your production server. So if you package all this content, that is technically called as image. That is technically called as image. And when you run this in your production environment, that is called container. That is called container. So this is not a new concept for us team. If you really see in organizations, whenever a new joinee comes in, right? So your IT team set up their own desktops, a desktop for them, right? When they prepare a desktop, they don't sit there, they don't install operating system, they don't install Microsoft Office one by one. They prepare a ghost image, a disk with all the necessary software. They just roll it out with a single shot. So they are not applying all the required things one by one. They keep all the required things as a single package and they set it up quickly. The same discussion we are also having here. Rather than installing each and every piece separately, let's prepare everything together and simply host it directly at your production level. Because if the application is working fine here, the same structure you also have here, and this should also work in production environment. If it is failing here, if it is failing in production environment, obviously it should fail at development level as well. This is where containers have come into the picture. So once you package the application code as an image, just run the same in production server also. It becomes a container. So image and container both are same. Why we are using different words? Image is kind of a static stage, whereas container is a running stage. Suppose you have a car, it is at parking, that is nothing but image. Same steering, same engine, same seats, same components. But when you have it on road, what changes? When you have it on road, what changes? You start your engine, you gear it up, and you are running, your wheels are moving. The components are same, but the engine is running. The same way, when you create a package, your Tomcat here is sleeping. When you run it as a container, your Tomcat here is running and it hosted the war file inside it and it is serving the end user. So runtime format of an image is called as container. Runtime format of an image is called as container. Apparently speaking, image and container both have the same content, but container is runtime format. Image is kind of static format. So with this, how can we define exactly an image? Image is nothing but your application with all its dependencies packaged as a single entity. Image is nothing but your application with all its dependencies packaged as a single entity. If you run this in your production server or IIT server or in cloud anywhere, it runs on CentOS only. No operating system dependency, because this war file is designed to run on this infrastructure only. This is how containers have become very popular. But how can I host these containers? How can I host these containers? Should I install any special software to run the containers? Yes, we need to. Yes, we need to. So normally speaking, take a same physical server. You should have operating system for sure. This is for sure operating system we need for sure. On top of our operating system, you need a containerization software. You need a containerization software, right? This containerization software allows you to run your containers. See, in VMs, we discussed it as hypervisor. Here we are calling it as containerization software. That's the only difference. And once the containerization software is installed, you can run your containers. Whatever we discussed here, we can run those containers here. We may think of having different operating systems. We have different operating system here. You may have different operating system here. Doesn't matter. Whatever the underlying operating system you have for this machine, doesn't matter. Your application always runs on this operating system. So whether you have Ubuntu here or Red Hat here, SUSE here, doesn't matter. Your application always runs on CentOS. How is it possible to run multiple operating systems on a same machine? Right? That's the beauty of containerization software. It takes care of it. And if you observe one more thing here, for running containers, I did not keep any constraints. Like 20 GB RAM or 30 GB disk space. Nothing like that. So there is always a dynamic way of allocating resources in containers. Suppose if this container wants 10 MB, it takes only 10 MB from host capacity. If it needs 20 MB, it takes 20 MB from this 300 GB only. So whatever it needs, it directly goes to the host and it takes it. If it wants more, it takes more. If it doesn't use it, it returns back. So this is how dynamically containers take the resources. And whether you believe it or not, the boot time of container is simply 2 minutes. The boot time of any container is simply 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, you can have your it's 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, you can start your container up and running. This is the beauty of containers. If you want 10 containers, yes, you can bring up another containers in 2 seconds. If you want 10 Tomcat instances, 2 seconds, 3 seconds maybe. If you design your image perfectly, in 2 seconds you can start your container. So boot time issue is gone, dynamic allocation issue is gone, whatever we discussed with VMs. Scalability is gone. You don't need to wait for days, months, because you have image already. Just run another copy, just run another container. So that issue is also gone. So all these are gone when we go for container. And the main thing is OS maintenance. Here, try to understand, team. This is the important point when we consider containers. The operating system, what we use inside containers, right? It is not at all a full-blown operating system. I can simply say it as operating system library or minimal operating system You believe it or not, 60 MB Ubuntu operating system is available. There is a Linux operating system called Alpine, which is available in 5.6 MB. See, nowadays if you take pictures with mobile, they are reaching 7 MB, 8 MB, but there is a Linux operating system available in 5.6 MB, right? These kind of minimal operating systems we use inside containers because this operating system provides whatever application needs. That's it. Suppose in order to run my war file, I don't need vi editor, I don't need ps command, I don't need netstat command, I don't need many default Linux features. So let's eliminate all of them. Then your OS becomes minimal. If you remove unnecessary things, it becomes lightweight. So those lightweight operating systems we use inside containers, and they do not have any kernel. If you know, team, Linux has kernel component, right? Linux OS has kernel component. So container operating systems never have kernels. They directly use this kernel if they want, the host OS kernel if they want. This way, these operating systems become lightweight. You don't need to go for maintenance, blah, blah, blah. You just take care of one operating system maintenance. That's it. How many containers you run doesn't matter. They are lightweight operating systems. As they are lightweighting operating systems, they're able to start quickly and easily. This is how containerization started. Nowadays, yes, to run microservices, as they are minimal application components, yes, containers are very, very important. Very, very important. I'm stopping here for a minute, team. Please go ahead if you have any questions. Please go ahead if you have any questions. You can unmute and speak if you have any questions. I'm pausing here for a minute. Please go ahead if you have any questions. Each microservice is a var or ER file. May not be, Siddharth, all the time. May not be. It can be. It can be a var file. Sometimes it may be a jar file. It may be a simple application also, application code also. So every time it need not to be a var file or ER file.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sure. I hope all of you are clear here. So now, what is this containerization platform? And what are all the containerization software we do have available in market? This is the next big thing we need to understand, right? See, team, there are many containerization software available in market. Many containerization software available in market. Whether you go for any or X or Y or Z, any containerization platform gives you the same features. All these features, whatever we discuss, they are same across all containerization software, right? Let's discuss what we have currently. When we think of containers, this thing comes into our mind always. These are containers in our knowledge so far, right? Always shipping containers we think of. How this is related to our own container, let's see. Imagine you have different types of goods to be shipped. I have car here, I have groceries here, I have a piano here, I have barrels here, I have drums here. I would like to I would like to wire, or I would like to transfer these things to some different place. What type of transportation should I choose? And what happens if I keep my groceries next to piano? What happens my servers next to a barrel? This is a big picture we need to think of. Instead of doing all these things, let's tightly pack all these things into a container. Now think of transportation of this container. Why to worry about individual transportation? Let's keep everything in a single space and let's think of this transportation, right? This is how, if you observe, I would like to host my static website or some DB or messaging queues or analytics, whatever the components I want to host on different infrastructures. It is development environment or cloud environment or QA environment, disaster recovery environment, or my friend's laptop. I need to install each and every piece separately. Why to do that? Let's pack all these things as a single image and ship that as a container to all the environments. So whatever the environment my developer may have, QA may be, your data center may be, your cloud may be, doesn't matter. Your application runs inside container. Your application runs inside the operating system, same operating system, same dependencies. This is where containerization started, and it's easy for us also, right? So there are many containerization technologies we have, team. LXC, it is all started with LXC many years ago. Docker, trending technology in market today for containerization. We have Rocket containers, we have Containerd. Nowadays people are using CRI-O. There are many containerization tools available, but Docker is the popular one. Docker made containerization easy. This LXC, Linux container concept, was there from years. Google started using this long ago, but Docker made it easy for us. Docker made it simpler for us. Of course, it also uses this LXC only. LXC means Linux containers. Docker also uses the same concept, but it made easy for us, right? So what is Docker now? It provides a way to run our application securely, isolated inside a container by packaging all the application components. Docker itself an organization, Docker itself a platform, Docker itself a software. We can say anything because the name is Docker. The same name they use. Docker is the organization name, Docker is the containerization platform, Docker is a software. You can use Docker on Windows or Linux to run your containers, right? So I can say Docker is an OS level virtualization, because in VM, if you remember, we discussed hardware level virtualization, but Docker is OS level virtualization. All the containers take the resources from OS directly. All the containers use the OS kernel features directly. We discussed this. That's why Docker is OS level virtualization, just similar to ESX and all we use in VMs, right? So this is about Docker. Docker is the best containerization platform currently we have, industry has. Many people, almost all the organizations who are into containers, they are using Docker only for containerization. With the help of Docker, you can create your application images, you can run your application containers, also you can manage them. Managing containers is called as orchestration team. Managing containers is called as container orchestration. Suppose there is more load coming in, more requests coming in, right? How to increase number of containers automatically? Auto scaling or auto healing. These are all the things we are hearing nowadays. Auto healing in the sense, suppose one of the containers is down because of some reason. Another container should come up. One of the hosts is down because of some reason. Number of containers should come up on another available host. Auto healing, right? These are all the features we need for these days. And also, we are in DevOps world, CI/CD. Everybody is looking for CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. With this, you need to bring up your application as quickly as possible. We need to have rolling deployment strategies. I want to keep a set of containers down or set of containers up and running with different versions. Yes, this is all possible with Docker. Rolling updates, rollbacks, auto scaling, all these are possible with containers, as they can run quickly and easily. You don't need to install many utilities or n number of software on a host. Just install OS, as you see here in this picture. Just install OS and then install your containerization software. Here, this containerization software is nothing but your Docker. Once you install Docker, yes, you can seamlessly run your containers. So if you think of your production environment, on your production environment, you just need to have operating system and Docker software. That's it. You don't need to install n number of things. Just get your image, run it as container. Container has everything for your application to run. So this is where Docker has become popular nowadays. And use cases, if you think of dev production parity, the same thing, whatever you have in dev, you will see in production also. You never face an issue now, like application is working here and not working there, because everywhere the content is same. It uses same operating system, same version of Java, same Tomcat version, same war file. That's it. If you would like to update the application again, create a new image again. That's how in dev and production, you maintain the same content. You always maintain the same content in dev and prod. That issue is gone. And simplified configuration. Containers are lightweight. You can quickly configure containers. You can quickly run them easily. And earlier days, if you want to scale up our environment, we used to take new VMs or new machines. Now, same image, run multiple containers. This also has become very easy. For code pipeline management, as we discussed already, containers are the best. To run your microservices, containers are the best platform. And for developer productivity, yes, it is helpful. Application isolation. You can run different types of containers on the same machine. You can run Node.js container, you can run Tomcat container, you can run some ABCD container. It's all very easy now. It's all very easy now with containerization and of course with Docker. And for this, what we need to learn? What are all the things we need to learn? So team, we need to understand everything about containerization. We need to understand everything about containerization. We should understand, what is Docker, how it helps, how it works. Then we need to understand how to install and configure Docker. Docker has multiple editions, community edition and enterprise edition, on different operating systems, how it works, all these things. And then how to run the containers, how to create the images, how to enable security, what is the orchestration, how these containers, provide networking features, or how they would talk internally, and how to store the data, how to preserve the data, and how to use enterprise edition, because community edition helps you for practice. Enterprise edition we use at enterprise level. In organizations we use enterprise edition, which comes with support. You need to pay for it, of course. It's a licensed one, enterprise edition, but you need to understand enterprise edition as well in order to work on Docker. At enterprise level we use enterprise edition only. I've been using Docker from past 5 years. I'm using enterprise edition only today also. So enterprise edition has same features as community edition, but yes, it is always special because we get support and we get another set of tools along with enterprise edition. By default with community edition, you don't get another set of tools, right? So all these things you need to learn in order to master Docker. These are all the contents you need to learn in order to master your Docker. You may think, okay, if we can learn, that is fine. Why DCA again? Why we need to go for certification? Nowadays, team, almost every organization, if you observe here and there, they are looking for certified people. They are looking for certified people. Are you certified is the first question being asked if you learn any technology. Nowadays, management also, at enterprise level, management also, looking for certification standard, right? For a few projects, they are taking only certified people only. So that's where DCA has its own significance in today's job market. Docker skills are highly sought after because it's new technology. It's new technology. Many organizations started using now only. For next few years, containers will be hotcakes. Container skill set will be hotcake. So DCA is very important. It plays a big role in your resume. Actually, if you go for certification, so learning is different. Getting certified is different. So this information I got from Docker certification page only, actually success.docker.com. If you go there, it shows you all these things. It costs you $195 to attend this certification exam. It's a proctor based certification exam. You can sit at your home and you can complete your exam. It's multiple choice questions you face, multiple choice questions only you face. And if you go for this certification, yes, it is proctor based certification. As I told you, it's online based. There will be someone monitoring your screen, and you need to open your webcam, you need to sit there, and you need to complete your exam. You should not talk, you should not have anyone in the room. They'll ask you to show your complete room, and in between also they ask you stop writing and show me your room again. So we can't take any chance. You should be prepared properly. You should have complete hands-on to attend this certification and to pass. Docker doesn't say this is the pass percentage, right? It shows you whether you passed or failed. That's it. It shows you whether you passed or failed. That's it. So we need to prepare well in order to go for this certification. And if you have complete hands-on, then only you can crack it, because it's a kind of scenario based exam. They don't ask you define a container, define an image like this, right? They give you a scenario. Suppose Ravi would like to have these many containers on so and so environment with so and so driver. So what do you choose? 1 2 3 4. They all look same, but with your experience you'll come to know the differences. So DCA is very important nowadays. I taught many batches for DCA for many of my clients. So this is the importance of DCA, and this is how a certificate looks like, Docker certified associate. So they'll give you by default 2 years of validity. After 2 years, again you need to go and write your certification. So this is about Docker. Let me take another 5 minutes to complete this. I will show you a quick demo how Docker looks like. Whatever we discussed so far, I would like to show you a simple example. Just give me 5 more minutes. We will be completing this. I have a machine with me. I have a machine with me. I'm logging into it. It's a cloud-based machine. I hosted it in Amazon. SSH. I'm connecting to this from my machine. So this is a simple plain vanilla machine. I mean to say nothing is installed on it. It is a fresh machine. It is an Ubuntu based machine. It is of version 18.04 Ubuntu. Now you have a machine with you. Now I would like to host containers on this machine, or you would like to host containers on this machine. How to host containers? We need to have containerization software to be installed. How to get this containerization software? Where to get this containerization software? Yes, I have it ready. For demo purpose, let me show you. I have a script ready with me. I just run the script. The script gets Docker installation for us. So let me prepare the script, docker.sh maybe. This is the script. These are all official instructions given by Docker only. For now, we don't need to look into all these things. Just we are getting an idea of how Docker looks like. That's it. So let me run the script. It takes a minute or so to complete. You may ask me any questions if you have meantime. Yes, Docker is successfully installed. So in order to make sure it is installed, you can say Docker version. Here you go, you can see the version of Docker, which is of 19.03. Now I have containerization software installed on my machine. Now I can easily run my containers. You may ask me, where is your image to run the container? Where is the image to run this container? By default team, as we discussed, minimal operating systems, all these things, Docker itself provides you all these things in a place called Docker Hub. This is the Docker Hub where you see almost all famous software available today. Let us say Tomcat. See, Tomcat image is available here. Let us say NGINX. NGINX is a web server. NGINX is a web server. It is available. Imagine I want to run Oracle. Oracle Database Enterprise Edition is available as an image. These are all images, not direct software. When I say image, imagine I'm running NGINX. When I say NGINX image, it has operating system internally, it has all its dependencies and Nginx software, NGINX software. So you can go through all these things if you have interest to see. For now, I directly run this and show you how quickly I can run a container. Let me download the image first. I can download the image. By default, if you install Docker, it directly connects to Docker Hub to download the images. Yes, a newer image of NGINX is downloaded. You can see that Docker images. Just see the size. 127 MB is the size of this image. It has operating system. It has Nginx software. Everything available. This is Nginx image, the package. Now I am running it as a container. Docker run These are all the flags we use. Once you start practicing, you will understand all these things. For now, not necessary. Let's run this. Done. My Nginx container is running. My Nginx software is running. You can access this by using the port number. Let me show you how to access. Take the IP address of the machine and use the IP address, port number 32768. There you go. Your Nginx is available. So one instance is available. I want to scale up my infrastructure. I want more instances. Run another. Run another. You see 3 containers are up and running within no time. In seconds, containers come up. They use different port numbers, means each container is different. Each container is isolated. So containers are isolated. They use different resources, different IP addresses, different port numbers. This is all because of a concept called namespace. Actually, I just would like to show you how we can run quickly an application. That's it. So this is how you can easily bring up your infrastructure up and running. If you want to really see what is inside this NGINX, let me show you quickly. So let me enter into one of the containers to show you what is inside. I'm inside the container now. Let me see what operating system is it using. See, it is using Debian OS. I have basically Ubuntu machine. On top of Ubuntu machine, I ran Debian OS. On top of it, I am running a container. Now you can understand this picture better. You have Ubuntu OS now. Just now you have seen the demo. On top of it, you install Docker as the containerization software. On top of it, you ran a container which is hosting Debian OS. This is how, if you run this Nginx container in your laptop or my laptop or somewhere, doesn't matter. It is same across. This is how, team. Containers are very easy to host, very easy to run. You just need to take care of the design, that image design and all. You can use Docker Hub to host it over there. And if you pull many operating systems, there are many operating systems available. You can start downloading your own favorite operating system, start building your own image. Suppose I want to create a Tomcat image based on CentOS. Yes, CentOS is here. So say Docker images. CentOS image is available for 237 MB. Docker pull Alpine. Your Alpine OS is available for 5.6 MB. See here, this is another Linux. Right? So like this, container images are available here. You start taking those images, and you start implementing your own image. You can save your images here. See, these are all my own images. I created my own images and I hosted in my account in Docker Hub. And there are public images, there are private images, there are official organization images. See here, this Oracle database, right? It is by Oracle organization only. It is Docker certified image. You can use it happily, right? So this is how, team, containers are very easy to host and very easy to run. Very easy